Hi, Ivar. What was your first computer?
It depends on what you mean by a computer, but if you mean, let's say, personal computer, it was actually an Apple II
Huh.
in Apple IIc.
Uh-huh.
So it was an advanced computer. And at that time, basically no one used laptops or similar.
Mm-hmm.
I worked at Ericsson, and
Ericsson. Uh-huh.
no one had it. No
Mm-hmm.
one had it. I had my boss was actually CTO of Ericsson, so I went into him and said, "I really need an Apple IIc, not
Mm-hmm.
one of these other MS-DOS machine or whatever we had at that time. I don't think it was MS-DOS yet, but it could
Mm-hmm.
be." And he said, "Why do you need it? You have secretary."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I buy one and I'll show you. So I
Mm-hmm.
bought one personally,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually he paid.
Okay. And why you wanted to have one? Just for fun, or you had, a secret mission at Ericsson?
I was writing a lot,
Okay.
very productive,
Mm-hmm.
and at Ericsson, using secretary for everything
Mm-hmm.
was not efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So, given I wrote so much, I felt I had to have it. And then I could print at the Ericsson machines.
Mm-hmm.
But writing, I prefer to have under my own control.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays we wouldn't even think any other way. So
Mm-hmm. And why you had to write that much? So what was your role at Ericsson?
at that time I was I had identified that I was useful to come up with new ideas. I was actually reporting to, as I said, a CTO of
Mm-hmm.
Ericsson, and not directly. He had one guy between us, but I often went directly into the boss.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote inspiring paper. I wrote basically a little book
Mm-hmm.
that was never published. It was internal.
Mm-hmm.
But was the beginning of what I later did.
Mm-hmm.
So I had been the main inspirator for developing software using components when no one else used components, at least not in the telecom industry.
Mm-hmm.
And that turned out to be 10 years later. This is when I bought my Apple II.
Mm-hmm.
10 years later, people had come to the conclusion that this is the key reason for the success of Ericsson, their switching system.
Oh, no kidding. So
I,
they switched, or they migrated from monolithic to component-based system in Ericsson, and it was success.
yes, Ericsson, we developed the system that at that time, and probably still is, the greatest commercial success story ever in the history of Sweden. It has probably competition from Spotify and some other
Mm-hmm.
successful Swedish products, but it lasted long. So I actually could. They asked me to if I wanted to get the PhD during work hours,
Mm-hmm.
and I was crazy, so I said yes, because if I failed to
Mm-hmm.
do it,
Mm-hmm.
then it would be end of history
Mm-hmm.
at Ericsson. So, but I didn't fail. In fact, I was my thesis has been my source of inspiration for the rest of my life.
What was
It
the
it,
title of your thesis?
it sorry, it was I designed. They asked me to make science of
Mm-hmm.
the way we develop software.
Mm-hmm.
As simple like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no professor that was interested in component-based development, really. Not that in their heart.
Mm-hmm.
We just felt it was a back end.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the professor that was my examiner, he said to me that components is a backend. He didn't use that term. He used some other terms, but he meant that. And but he was my examiner, and the other professors that approved my thesis approved it. No more, no higher grade. And still, I think it has been my source of inspiration the rest of life. It basically meant that the academics at that time were lagging behind. And maybe that is natural. Industry has to demonstrate something, and to make it more understandable, more streamlined and scientific, it has to go through academic research.
Interesting. So which year was it, roughly?
Oh, it's 1985 I got my thesis.
1985?
Yeah, so long time ago. And it still is my source of major source of inspiration. There are still ideas there that are not implemented, but I know they will be implemented.
And in which programming language was it? So how the software was written at Ericsson back then? Was it C or?
At that time, we at Ericsson had our own. You could call it object-based language. So it supported components. It was a language to support, and actually the developer developed components. They didn't develop a whole system. We developed component, but then there was some other technique, not a compiler, not a language, that helped us to compose these components into a complete system. And the components were, we had at that time, DevOps was something that we had already 1976.
Wow.
Supported all the way to operations and continued change was built into the machine.
Okay. And what was the name of the programming language you remember?
Plex.
Plex. Okay. Good name, actually. And by the way, I have to apologize. I guess your first name is Ivar, not Ivar, right? Ivar,
Yes,
I think.
yes.
And
in Swedish, you know.
in Swedish. And Jakobsen, I guess, right?
Absolutely correctly pronounced.
Yeah. I spent some time in Sweden in a project, in Java project, and in Gothenburg, actually. And I really enjoyed it. So I actually became quickly an expert, because what I found out, so there is a streetcar which goes to, I think it's called Zondholmen. Is it correct? So it is the...
Zondholmen, yes.
Zondholmen, okay. And from there you can pick a ferry to islands. So every day, I pick another island, and I ask, my Swedish colleagues, do you know this island? So never was there. It's like I completely explored the island. So they were like small islands, and moved to the next one, right? So this was my social hack in Gothenburg.
Very beautiful, very nice.
Yeah.
So were you at Chalmers?
Yeah. I was, I think, on all the islands you can reach by ferry, by the regular ferry. Okay. So I think this was
I
think
asked you
10
if
years
you
ago.
were at Chalmers Institute of Technology, or were you...
No. I was at Siemens back then. Quickly.
Siemens?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we also use a little bit UML. But interesting. So in 1985, so what happened then? I think, so what happened to me is in, I guess, 1994, there was a German magazine called IX, and I read a story about UML. And I said, okay, I have to actually do something about that because it's interesting. So I found, Three Amigos and UML and the beginning. So I tried to learn, but back then before I actually really started to program. So I knew a little bit basic in Turbo Pascal and C, but not really. And but I said, okay, there is something into it. So this was my first touch, with UML in 1994. So what happened between 1985 and 1994? You stick with Ericsson, so you still worked at Ericsson, or what you did back then?
Well, after I had graduated, I got in the middle of the graduation, I got actually a grant from a foundation by the old guy who was not the founder of Ericsson, but he was the majority owner of Ericsson.
Okay.
And I was not the only one that got that kinds of grants, but I got a very good grant, and I stayed And then I contacted MIT and asked if they were interested in letting me work with them at the Institute of Function Programming. I was passionate about function programming. This is 1983. And logic programming. I did a lot of, at least some coding in Prolog.
Oh, okay.
And felt very comfortable with it. I understood immediately that we need more than one kind of language. We need imperative, we need logic, and we need functional, and a combination as a hybrid. But hybrids were not very popular at that time. Erlang was developed, and I have absolutely no contribution to Erlang.
Okay.
So I want to say that. But Erlang was developed at Ericsson, and at that time, people at Ericsson were saying, "No, it's C++," so that didn't went well inside Ericsson. It went very well outside Ericsson, and the same thing for me. I left Ericsson in 1987, and that was a very peaceful leaving because my job at that time was continued research, but and I had absolutely no plan and no thinking in setting up my own company and running my own company. I knew my father was an entrepreneur. I'm not going to be an entrepreneur. I don't have that mindset, which eventually turned to be wrong. That's exactly the mindset. I like to run ideas to completion, not just talk, write papers. So, and at the same time, but I didn't leave on my own, on my own will. I was more or less fired, even if that didn't exist at that time. Ericsson didn't fire people. My boss, whom I never met at Ericsson, he told me, "We have no budget for you anymore, so isn't it better you set up your own company?" And I felt I did a very good negotiation because I got 6 months of salary, which today is ridiculous compared to when Ericsson fires 1,000 of people. They get at least, I don't know, at least 18 months.
Okay.
But that was the best kick I could get because I set up a company that developed what later became known as Rational Unified Process. We developed, I call it Objectory. Objectory, it stood for Object Factory. At that time, factory thinking was very popular in methodology space, which died completely with agile. But Objectory became later acquired. My company became later acquired by Rational, and Rational changed the name to Rational Objectory Process, and then it became Rational Unified because we did UML. So that was at that time the most successful methodology, and it was used. I mean, it was a period of 10 years, I would say, when everyone wanted to learn RAP, everyone wanted to work with RAP. But then Agile came and basically killed all the old methods. So now the old methods started to call themselves Agile whatever.
Yeah.
So Agile RAP became a name for something called... I was not involved in that, by the way.
But by the way, it was hugely successful. So I spent most of my time, in Germany, Switzerland, Austria, some Sweden, and everywhere. Rational Unified Process was everywhere. So it was highly misused as agile is. There were lots of consultants who just were interested in the diagrams and not in the actual process. This was the main problem. Certification, all the stuff, the same problem with agile, I would say, exactly the same. And maybe not the agile, more like, how this called, the scrum masters and stuff. There's, you have to think, I would say you have to think about, build good software and not about, which certification you need, because then it doesn't work anymore. But what I like about the rational unified process, I think the first thing is, I think it was called the vision, right? So the idea was, this was almost forgotten, that you have to write, as a short summary, why you build a system at all. So this was, I found it in the rational unified process, and I say, okay, huge, complex system with rational UIs, but why you are building this actually? This was my hack, my question. And they say, why would you like to know it? Like, because it's a part of rational unified process. And, one pager just briefly describe what the system is doing. And which also was very good. I would say the use case diagrams, there's very similar to user stories. And my take was, if, so UML was for me a standard. So if we sketch something, why not to pick, UML diagrams? Before I invent my own, my sketching stuff, I would just pick, the diagrams. So I used whatever I needed from UML. It worked for me, but I was not too dogmatic. And I think the problem is people believe that the rational unified process is the entire, if you follow everything, you will build great software. Then it doesn't work. They drop it all together and I say, okay, let's start with agile. And there's another extreme, and there are no diagrams at all, just iterate, extreme programming. And then I say, okay, we need something in between. This is always there's no black and white, I would say. Software development is gray, at least is how I see it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is a very interesting story. RAP was the most successful product at that methodology or process at that time. But I saw the complexity, and we wrote a process handbook that was about several thousand pages. I mean, 2,000 maybe, and no one ever read all that. Not even I. I was not leading the effort, but I at least understood when Agile came. I understood immediately it will have a huge impact on RAP. And I felt that there is a lot of knowledge in RAP. There is a lot of things. I mean, things that are now coming back, like architecture is very important, even in Agile projects. And at least those who really have an architecture, there are smaller projects that don't need to have it. But so we had a lot of competence there. It was iterative. It was incremental, but it was not as short iterations and sprints as today. So, of course, there were things that could be better, and that is what will happen forever. Things will be better, but at that point in time, there were good things. However, the problem was it became too big, it was too clumsy and heavy in all aspects. It was impossible to really learn the whole RAP. So I founded a company with my eldest daughter who worked at Rational but left. She wanted to do something different than being a salesperson at the Rational. So I suggested to her, why don't we do what I've been dreaming about for 20 years? Because already in 1981, I was standing on the front line and saying we should start to think about using artificial intelligence inside Ericsson. And I wrote a little 50-page paper about how an intelligent agent could help. We use the term intelligent agents for what today people call a copilot. An intelligent agent is that software that help you, a particular individual or role, to do the job. So it's side by side. The individual is in command, but the software do all the and not all as much of a boring or no brain work. Because when you develop software, you think for a couple of minutes and then you follow a pattern most often. That pattern can be described in forms of rules and AI technique. So we built a product to support RAP, at least the essential parts of RAP, and that product worked fantastic. The clients loved it. We had many banks, insurance companies. They just loved it. But RAP died. Okay, so and then the product, since it supported RAP way of working, it died. It really didn't die, but I actually took that company and acquired that company into my current company.
Okay.
So it is still alive. Well, it's still there, but not alive. And I learned two things. First, we cannot build for one single process. We need to build for universal stuff, something that is universally acceptable. And two, Agile came, and Agile was another reason why it was killed, because Agile was anti these kind of tools. So what we need to get the next wave of AI. All right? So there we are sitting on, first what we did is develop Essence, and made Essence an international standard. It's not only me, I had a role to drive it, but we had hundreds of people involved in developing this standard. And we tried to find a common ground for all methods and frameworks. What is common? What is it that we can say we always have, we always do, we always need, and so on? And that became Essence. So you can see Essence as a specification that you can reuse when you develop your own method. So on top of Essence, you can describe all kinds of practices. And these practices are then described in a standard language, namely the Essence language. Very simple, 2 hours to learn. That was the model. And we have today work, and we also do it in a different way than most methodologies do. We don't take a method or practice and make it our own. So, for instance, we work with Jeff Sutherland when it comes to Scrum, and we did an essentialization of Scrum together with Jeff, and he is the intellectual owner of that. It's not me. We have suggested improvement, but he had to say yes.
So Essence is a kind of facade.
It's a kind of process framework, yes. But it's not the same kind of framework that SAFe, for instance, or any other of them.
I have a question regarding the agent and rational unified process. So intelligent agent, what was the task? What was the goal of the agent? Did he create it, or it created afterwards the diagrams, the description, or what was the job of the intelligent agents back then?
It could help you to create the diagram, use case diagram, and you mentioned the boundary control entity diagrams, and of course move over to design and create an architecture and testing all the whole way from use cases all the way. And what it did actually, it prompted questions to if a user was an amateur, for instance, to do analysis. In one bank, I remember it was a Swedish bank, a guy who had never worked with specification. He was specifying a new product, So the tool basically prompted, what is the main idea? Basically finding out your building, question after question. And then it sorted out what the product would be, created use cases, with the help of sorry, the developer was in command and answered questions, but it was helped to answer these questions. It was clearly a copilot. And this was the guy I mentioned. He had never done anything like that himself, but he just loved the tool. And then he could even go in to do analysis using boundary control and entity objects, and he had never done anything like this. And so basically, our hypothesis was that a big percentage of the work we do today, if we follow a process, is no brain work. It is, and I heard numbers like 80%. We clearly removed, say, 40% of the work that otherwise would have to be done by someone who had a clear understanding himself or herself of how it should be done. With a tool like this tool was called Waypointer, you didn't really need to have a lot of that knowledge. So this was my weapon back in 2000, started the company in 2000, to fight the heaviness of RAP and to make it light. But as I said, two things killed it. RAP died and agile came.
Yeah.
So
how the agent was implemented? Was it a neural network, or how you did it back then?
no, we basically designed. I think it designed it .NET. I'm not 100% sure now. We had about 10 people developing Waypointer, and we designed our own rule language, our own rule engine, but implemented it in .NET. So it was a lot of if then else, and so on. But it was we thinking was in rules. We had to develop our own rule language because of this copilot, if I say so, idea.
Interesting. So what's or interesting? I mean, I didn't know about that. So I would say in Germany or in Rational Unified Processing UML was even more successful 2005, 6, 7. I know it for sure because lots of companies use that. And what was also very successful was the idea of model-driven architecture, where you describe UML in PIM, in platform independent model. Then you had the transformer, which generated the platform specific model. And I used that a lot with Java and J2E to generate the XML descriptors and all the plumbing, mostly with Together and also with, I think, Magic Draw. So there was like an engine, and this was like, like an iterator. So I iterated over the PIM, took the information and generated all the code, was also very successful. But this was actually killed by increasing efficiency and productivity of Java. In my case, I'm a Java developer because right now you can write very lean Java code without any plumbing, and this MDA generated all the, I would say, self-evident stuff, right? Interfaces, factories, and XML, which is just information application. So now you helped me a lot with boundary control entity, and I tell you why. So I spent lots of my time in Java projects, enterprise Java projects, and the problem was always, the design, not architecture and design, and especially naming, you can imagine. So I came up with my own names. Actually, I wrote a book about that. So there was like facade, service, and domain. But in every project, people ask me, why you name it, facade and not endpoint? Why it's domain and not POJOS or entity or whatever? And then I found boundary control entity, and I took a look at this, and I said, actually, it was designed for the views, but it fits perfectly also the backend. And the huge advantage of boundary control entity is the sorting in the IDE. BCE, so boundary comes first, then control, and then entity. So my stuff was never rightly sorted in the IDE because, facade, service or service, there was like the entity came first and whatever. So by accident, it was right. So the idea was boundary is like, the interface to the outside world. Like, it could be REST, SOAP, or whatever. Control, if there is some, some additional processing to do. So there is in control. And entities, long-lived data, domain objects, sometimes even, transient domain objects, but usually JPA entities which are mapped to databases. And this took off because at the meeting, if someone asked me, about boundary control entity, I pointed to you, Zach reads his book, I don't care, this is a standard. And this was, the greatest social hack in the last 15 years because I could focus on the real thing and never ever had to discuss, the naming. So for me, standards are great because you don't have, to reinvent the wheel in every project. So you can point to something which somehow works. And to be honest, I don't like the naming a lot because, boundary is okay. Control is overloaded with, UI control. So it is a bit problematic. And entity is fine. So domain would be better. So probably I completely misused, your methodology. But I wanted to tell you, to say thank you because it worked great for me. And what I'm doing right now, I do the same boundary control entity in web components. So there's a web standard called custom elements and web components. So I also using BCE, in the front end where the boundary is this what you see on the screen. Control is like the glue between the screen and the store, which is Redux store, and store are the entities. So I hope I used your methodology right all the years. And so what's your take or how you found boundary control entity? Was it your idea and why you invented it? Or what is the story behind boundary control entity?
It was quite logical. If you want to create implementation-free description of your use cases, of the requirements, there are things you need to remember. There are things that you need to talk about the interface, and there is then something that coordinates between these things. And so, it was something we came up. It was me, back in 1985, 86, or something, maybe a little later. So, and it has still used, and but not as with many other things. It became a part of UML, a profile of UML. Many things UML has also been reduced in usage, but the world is coming back because. There is a lot of interest to really get UML to come back in some shape. I participate in discussions about that. It's not my key point, but it's still something I think is important.
But I think you described ECB in a book, right? This
was
yeah, because I found the cover of the book. I think I read this book, but maybe 20 years ago. But I still refer to the book. It's like, if you would like to know, read the book. I'm not sure whether someone reads the book, but then the discussion ends, This is my hack. It's like, okay, this is the book, which was really great. What I have to tell you, the boundary control entity is available. The icons, the really iconic icons, almost everyone knows that, are available in all tools. It is available in Visio. It is available in Draw.io, like the open source tool, in Enterprise Architect, Magic Draw, whatever you get. Even OmniGraffle on Mac, on Apple, understands the icon. So for me, it was really great to sketch a system, So this is a boundary control entity and everything in a package, which in my eyes is almost like a component, a little less so. And what I do in Java, so the components are Java packages, and boundary control entity are sub packages. So I have always in my system, in all my software I write actually, there's a boundary package, control package, and entity package. And the really interesting part is I've only one big rule. You have to name, the component packages after business meaning, after domain stuff. So you would be not allowed in my project, to call something, data access object, factory, utility, foundation, because it's meaningless. So I try to enforce, just business names in the packages, and boundary control entities looks always the same. And the impact is now you can look, in all Java projects, if you know the domain, you immediately find out what the system is doing. So this was a very simple rule, but it worked surprisingly well. And lots of Java developers say, okay, this is actually really great. It's okay. Boundary control entity is not from me, right? I just pick the idea from you, but it works really well.
Oh, wonderful! It's music to my ears.
Yeah, I was a little bit afraid, with the podcast with you. It was like, because if you tell me I did it completely wrong, I misunderstood the entire process, now I have the problem. We will have to cancel the podcast because all my work in the last 15 years or 20 years was completely wrong, right? So,
no, absolutely not.
Oh, thank you.
I think there are many things that will come back. UML is coming back, as I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But what is really something that I haven't talked so much about, this essence that we created, and now we have many famous people, famous methodologists, adopting essence to describe their methods and practices.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned, I think I mentioned it, Jeff Sutherland uses it for Scrum and Scrum at Scale.
Mm-hmm.
We have Scott Ambler using it for his new practices, and part of Disciplined Agile was described using Essence. He stands fully behind it. David Anderson for Kanban, some part of Kanban. We have, now, a couple of weeks from now, I'm going to speak together with Nigel Turlov, who had created the flow system together with John Turner, which is a very interesting framework, very interesting, very much in competition with the top other frameworks. And there are 8 about people that have become our partners. The thing is, we don't rewrite, we don't create, we don't take their work and do it ourselves. We work with them, and they are owners of the result. Now, but in the whole time, all the time here, since we did this Waypointer product, which actually got a productivity product award 2004, and that was this product was consisted of a set of intelligent agents. But it more or less died due to, as I said, RAP died, and Agile didn't like that kind of tools. But now we have a renaissance of AI. And in my work with Essence basically was inspired by being able to support many methods and give AI support not only to one method but to many methods. So we are now very soon, in the end of this month, we are going to demo in Lisbon at the conference World Agility Forum. We are going to show that, to summarize it simply, Essence, AI plus Essence is much better than just AI, because Essence help us to prompt questions enormously. We can get hundreds of questions, and not only that, also the practice is built on top of Essence, so you can get the Scrum-specific practice questions. All that is supported by having built Essence. So we are extremely well equipped to apply ChatGPT, but not only ChatGPT, also with intelligent agents that help you to model and do work, do your job. It's not only for creating questions for learning and inspiration or using a practice. It's also for creating models, and that is not you don't get that from GPT technique. You get it from intelligent agents.
So, to my understanding, so Essence AI is like prompt engineer on steroids, right? This is it helped you to ask the right questions. So this is the main problem with the entire AI. So you have like a curated set or best or a question best practice technique, which and the agent will ask you the right questions, and if you answer the questions, you are following the best practice without knowing it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this is perfect because this is actually the entire problem of AI. You have to know which question to ask. Because I mean, this is if you know the question, it is not a problem the knowledge, but this is always the truth. Even with Google, you always have to to think about the question first. So this is what you told me a few minutes ago. So the problem is the thinking, and everything else is plumbing. And AI can help us to reduce the plumbing, like MDA did 20 years ago, but a little bit more efficiently. And this is actually interesting. So I have two questions, because one was about agile. I have to admit, I don't like agile a lot. And the reason being is, for me, it is self-evident. Why? If you watch someone, let's say a musician, who would like, to learn guitar, whatever happens is iterative. There is no waterfall. It's like, you have to read a book and then you are Jimi Hendrix, You have to iterate. So, play 1 note, 2 notes, 3 notes, and the entire process is agile, iterative, without knowing it. If someone learns to program, so I had lots of interviews, in my... You are a little bit different, right? Because if I ask you about the first computer, we skipped maybe the first few years of your life, right? So usually I get questions like, my first computer was Commodore 64 or whatever, and your first was a job, right? So, but and everyone, start playing, tinkering, iterative process, and then they had a problem. They iterated, and studied and became professional. So, to my knowledge, there was no one who just read a book and became a software engineer. Like, would be a waterfall, and even waterfall, I would say, at the beginning was iterative. So the waterfall was not as waterfall as many thinking, right?
It's never been.
Never been. So I would say the agile was like, selling something which everyone knows about, right? This was, the misconception that the software industry is different to the entire world, that you have, to think a lot and then sit down and write everything down. And if you follow all the, all the rational unified process and whatever, everything was iterative. There was something went wrong on the way, between the spec. What happened? So, and what's your take on agile? Because for me, it was, of course, it has to be iterative. Just talking how iterative has to be, and whether it is 2 weeks iteration or 2 days iteration. So right now in my project, we have sometimes 1 day iterations, but it really depends on the project, right? We cannot say all project have to iterate 2 weeks or one day, or it really depends, on the context as always, right?
Agile has meant a lot, and it was needed.
Mm-hmm.
But but it didn't need to be so fundamental. Mm-hmm. Basically, throwing out everything we had. Mm-hmm. To just do same thing, developing software, mm-hmm. but with a completely different way of thinking. So everything old was bad, mm-hmm. And that was unnecessary. Mm-hmm. But I have to be paradoxal here. Mm-hmm. On one hand, it was unnecessary. Mm-hmm. On another hand, it was necessary, mm-hmm. because at that time we didn't have a technique and the foundation to basically, in a systematic way, change the old way of doing things, mm-hmm. to the agile way of doing things. Yes. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the things that is now built into using Essence, because you can, in small steps, but fundamentally important steps change any process to something better. So people who invested millions and millions in dollar. I mean, I know companies that invested in millions of dollar in RAP, and then they had to throw it out because we young people didn't want to hear anything else than things that were agile. But all these things could, in a organized way, have been replaced. So the people who already have learned, let's say, the old way of working, could, in small steps, learn the new way of working. And that is true for, RAP was a revolution compared to what was there before, the structured methods.
Yeah.
The structured methods were, to some extent, good, but they had they had a metaphor that what they developed had two parts: program and data. And now we are thinking more in terms of components, objects, and so on. So even that could have been done.
For me, the agile was very, very, very good for management because just I find the Agile Manifesto, what it says, individual and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. And so if you show this to the manager, you can explain things like, for instance, the software documentation. So what I remember in Java, right? The entire Java doc was highly misused because the entire Java doc was generated. And I was highly against that because I don't know, a little bit Java maybe. So, there are like getters and setters. And what I really hated in all the projects, where they say, this is a getter which returns a string. They just rephrase what already in the code. And then the entire Java code base was bloated. And I just say, just stop writing such comments, And with Agile Manifesto, I pick whatever I needed, to fight the bloat. So this was good for management. But I think all the programmers who just wanted to build good software and have fun, they were iterative from the beginning. Whether it was XP or Crystal or Agile or whatever, or Scrum, they just iterated and making the software better with or without diagrams. Now, the second thing about Essence and AI. So if you think about this, I can now go to ChatGPT because I had spent lots of time. I also get questions. What's my take, on AI and software engineering? And let's say I go to ChatGPT and say, write a Java program. Let's say now we have ChatGPT 10, right, in 5 years. And they say, just write banking software for me. So if I just misspell something or I don't specify it correctly, it will generate for me the software. And either I will have to review the source code and completely understand what happened, which is probably impossible or will take longer than actually write this by myself, which we already had the same problem. I don't know whether you remember, the entire movement of offshore was the same problem. You have to spec, and the idea was you send the spec to someone, and someone will just write it down, and you are done, which never worked. I would say ChatGPT is similar, right? But faster iterations. But this is like your offshore agent, I would say, for me. So now the problem is how to know. Or how to document what ChatGPT did, because if you have the second version, you either you build on that or you say regenerate the system. So I would say where Essence AI could be interesting, to try to document all these steps, because I would say the source code will lose its meaning if you think about this, right? Because if ChatGPT generates source code, and you have no time to read the source code, I don't care about the source code. It can generate a bytecode and I'm fine as long as it works. But you still need to understand what happens behind the scenes, not only from the developer perspective, but from traceability, auditability, for all the certifications required. So I think then Essence AI could be a necessity, right? It's not like nice to have, but you will have something to do, to document this entire process again, right?
Absolutely, yes. Agreed.
Oh, very good. So I understood your Essence AI movement, and
and as you understand, it's like getting a present from heaven to find that now what's needed to really make it successful is, as far as we understand, in place. So we look out for this presentation. I don't know if it will be recorded, but we can create a demo ourselves. So,
and I will point to the demo. I've also can reference on my YouTube channel, whatever. So I'm really interesting. So it could be interesting. One question, the personal question: are you still coding a little bit just for fun, or no?
No, I don't. I'm too busy, but I read code at least.
And you enjoy it?
Yeah. I read to see how it could be better. To be honest with you, one of my problems is that I'm never really happy with what I've done. I always want to make it better. And same thing with languages. I always think about how things can be better.
Yeah.
And that is something deep in my genes, and probably not always ideal, but I'm a very happy man, living a very good life, and enjoying every minute of work. To me, what I'm doing is not, I don't feel it as work. Most people will consider it work, but I think it's having fun.
Yeah, the same is here. The problem in my case is lack of time. I really enjoy my work, but the problem with enjoying work is, that the life goes too fast. So sometimes I would say I would like, to get a boring job for 1 year and really, make the time move a little bit slower. Because for me, it's just so many interesting things, and the more fun you have, the faster the time goes. I don't know whether it's the right thing. This is my problem, but you are one of my idol because you are a little bit older, I would say, a little bit. And how old are you? If I may ask you, is it?
Actually, I had birthday 2 days ago. Let's see, yes, 2nd of September, and I was born. The day after Germany went into Poland.
Okay.
And the day before France and England. So my parents had a little worrying time when they were standing on the beach in Ystad. Ystad is just opposite to Germany.
Okay.
And they could see the flashes in the sky.
Okay.
September 1st.
Okay.
So that was a worrying time. And for them, I knew, of course, not much about it, but I grew up in a very nice little city, 13,000 people, became a passionate handball player, but not in a star position. However, I became the best coach in town.
Wow!
So I learned. I love to train. I love to make people more successful, and they were very successful.
Yeah, very good. So I'm thinking you are not thinking about retirement. There is no such a thing like retirement, right?
No, retirement. No.
Yeah, very good, because you become even more my idol right now. Because what I'm thinking about retirement, if you retire, you still would like to read books or do some Sudoku or whatever. So before I do this, I still I will do coding, and you can do your AI with Essence. It's exactly the same thing. So enjoy what you are doing and just keep it doing, right? So
yeah, absolutely. I'm also writing 2 family books. And the one is titled, I have a young son. He's 7 years old, and I've tried. I promised I'm going to give a speech when he has his 50th birthday. and I will be a little older at that time. But if for some reason I wouldn't be there, I am writing a book titled "What They Don't Teach You at School: to be smart." Because I feel that this education system, not Sweden is a little bit better because they focus more on the emotional sides, the EQ than IQ. Not more, equally much about. Whereas in many other countries, let me mention China just as an example, China, Korea, and so on, where it's primarily about knowledge acquisition instead of knowledge usage. And to be smart, you need to use your knowledge in the right way. So this is a passion I have. I'm working on this for many years on the side. Now I am working a little bit more, but I have help right now to do it.
Very interesting. So I would really interested in the book. If you can send me a pointer, so I will also try to promote it. Because what's also interests me, how to learn.
It will not be a published book, by the way.
Oh, then it's pity.
I mean, maybe someone twists my arms and say, make it public. And it's not impossible, but this is not planned.
Okay, this would be fine, because my observation is, observing myself, basically, if you're passionate about thinking about something, you learn without knowing it, right? Because but if you are, and even if you know, okay, I have to acquire the knowledge, before in order to do this, you are still more successful because you know the why you should do this. So if you know, it's very similar to the vision statement in rational unified process, right? If you know why you have something to do, you are far more, into it, and you learn orders of magnitudes faster, and nothing is impossible, I would say. But just to perform an EQ test and you are not motivated, you will maybe even fail. Not fail. You will not as great as if you are motivated in your area. So it is. It's a pity, but it will be a really interesting book.
We'll see. And the other book is more like a set of storytelling. So storytelling is very important,
yes.
And it needs to be fun.
Yeah.
No one reads a book without it is entertaining. And I have so many fun stories from meeting interesting people. And
what I would love to do, is this book going to be published or not?
No.
So this is my next stage, to write books for fun, for private. So this is what I'm not at the level as you, but it's also interesting. What I would love to do in one point of time, re-invite you back and talk a little bit more deeply about Essence AI and funny stories. I really enjoyed funny stories as well. This would be a great pleasure for me and my listeners.
We can have a funny story podcast.
Yeah.
And I guarantee there are a whole bunch of them.
So let's do it. So maybe after Lisbon, if you are a little bit more quiet time, and we can talk how Lisbon late went. Maybe there's a recording, you can point to the recording, and funny story podcast. I will really appreciate it.
Yeah, we can do that. Absolutely.
Perfect.
That could be, I think that would probably be more interesting than this podcast, because people love to have a good laugh, right?
Yeah, but this is also important to capture some of the history. Where people can find your company, Essence AI, and you on Twitter and whatever you like. So whatever resources you have. I will point also to show notes, but maybe, where people can find you on the internet.
Okay.
Where?
You know how to find all that information, right?
Yeah, I will find, I will put to the show notes, the Twitter, your Twitter pointer, Eva Jacobson Consulting, right? All the pointers, and then will be show notes of the podcast.
You can also, a particular LinkedIn series that I'm just now writing, titled Our Journey to AI. And it has, I think the second article will be published today.
Okay.
And there will be 3 that talks about what what we have done, and now we are talking about, and then we talk about what we are doing.
Perfect. Thank you. So I will re-invite you back for the funny stories for sure. So this is set in stone. If not, I will send you a tweet every day, just to give you back on the show. So I'm really into it. And the only thing I know in Swedish is two things I know in Swedish. One is fika, which means break, because I learned it from my colleagues.
Fika, yeah.
Yeah. And the other one is Kalle Anka, of course, because in all the demos they just use Kalle Anka. It's like, who is Kalle Anka? And they told me this Donald Duck, right?
Yes.
And you said Spotify is very Swedish company, and I think Skype was also Swedish, right?
Which one?
Skype.
Skype, yes.
Yeah, they sold it for a huge amount of money. Actually, this was roughly 2003 or 4. It was way beyond their time. And regarding Ericsson, I love the company, but what I remember, it was maybe 2005-6. They had cellular phones. I had one from Ericsson, and it was incredibly thin. What I remember. It was a very thin, and I could open this. It was almost like a paper. So I forgot, I forgot the name of the phone, but I was really impressed. It was way beyond the time. So Ericsson was always, interesting to me. So thank you, and see you in few weeks, month. But I will ping you for sure.
Thank you so much.